Hi there, I'm Shane, and in this video I'm going to be discussing how to use masks in Adobe Lightroom to help enhance your photos by demonstrating such in a couple of different situations by editing a photo of a pet, a portrait, and a landscape. So this video is going to be dedicated to talking about masks in Adobe Lightroom. And it actually doesn't matter which version of Lightroom you're using because since the most recent updates to both the Adobe Lightroom CC and Classic both use the same editing tools, so it will look the same and function the same no matter which version of the software you're using. Today though, I'm going to be working in the latest version of Adobe Lightroom CC. This video is also part of a series I'm working on discussing the basics of editing in Adobe Lightroom. So if you'd like a refresher on the basics, I made a video on that recently and I'll have it linked on screen right now. However, if you want to dive into just learning how to use masks, that's absolutely okay, and that's what today's about. Chances are, if you've been editing images for a while, you've run into a situation where you want to enhance a certain component of an image without affecting the image as a whole, or vice versa, that you want to edit the background without having your subject be affected. And that's where masks come into play. They allow you to selectively edit certain components of your image in either increase your sharpness, change your colors, or do whatever you really want without having a global repercussion to the image. So it's a very powerful tool to help you get a little bit more clinical while you're editing your photos. So on that note, I have an image here of my friend's cat, Carabiner. And I like this photo. He's a very cute kitten, and I kind of want to just make him pop out a little bit more, as well as match the colors of the background to his fur because he's quite warm and the background is a little bit blue. So in order to do this, I want to open up the mask tool. This can be done by clicking M on your keyboard or simply just clicking on this tool, which is either right on the side here, or if you're in Classic, right beneath your histogram there. And once I'm inside here, I'll see I have several options to work with. The first two options here are your automatic selection tools, and I'm just going to brush over those for now and we'll discuss those in the next photo. I'm going to start with the very fundamentals, and that is the brush tool, which simply is a brush you can use to paint where you want to mask in your image. In order to make a new mask layer, you simply need to click on the tool you'd like to use. In this case, it's the brush, so I'll click on it. And we can see here, I have a little pop-out window that is for my masks. And this is essentially where your masks are going to live. So it makes a blank layer called Mask 1. If I double click on it, I can change the name of it to whatever I want. In this case, I'm going to call it Eyes. And there we go. I have a new mask layer called Eyes. On this layer, I can paint anywhere with my brush, and I simply can click down here. If I want to make it bigger, I can scroll up on my scroll wheel or scroll down, or just use the slider to do so. And I make it larger or smaller. If I click right beside the little number here, there's a drop-down menu for more options. There's a few sliders here that I can play with. The feathering tool decides how hard the edge of your brush is. I can have a very hard edge that's not going to have any fade, or if I feather to 50%, it can be a little bit harder of an edge, but not too soft. And then if I keep it at 100, you can see the fall off is very dramatic. It's a very soft edge that can have easier transitions. If I do want a little bit more smooth edges though, I can use the flow tool here. This is essentially deciding each stroke of your actual brush, how much it's going to lay down essentially. So if I set it to 50%, each brush stroke is going to lay down 50% of the mask. And if I go over it a few times, you can see the density increases. Or I can just have a few very light strokes. However, if I bring it down all the way to 10, you can get very very precise by having a gentle fall off by manually kind of going over the same spot a dozen times, kind of like you would with shading with a pencil. However, I find this isn't necessarily the most functional tool just because it's not as precise as you would always want it. So usually I just keep it at 100% and just live with that. The next slider is called your density. This one can be a little bit confusing because similar to flow, it limits how much layers, how much mask you're actually putting down. The difference with the density is an upper limit, where the flow you can go over multiple times to make it darker. When you lower the density, If I set it to 20, at most, it's gonna lay down a mask of 20% density. No matter how many times I go over that area, that's my limit. So if I bring it to 60, you can see it's gonna get darker. And if I take it all the way to 100, it'll have a full density mask. So this is another way to get a little bit more control over your layers. However, I don't want any of this. So I'm gonna just get rid of this brush layer and I'm gonna make a new fresh start. I just want it to affect the eyes. So all I'm gonna simply do is make a little bit of a smaller brush. I'll make my edges a little bit harder. And I'm gonna use this handy tool at the bottom by clicking this check mark. This is automatically gonna have Lightroom help me find edges. So I don't really wanna paint the fur around the eyes. I just wanna affect the eyes. By clicking on auto, Lightroom's gonna help me kind of find just the edges of the eyes. And again, I'll go on this eye here and drag around the edges. So there we go. It's simply just selecting the eyes. By default, it's a red mask. This isn't how it's gonna edit the photo, just the color red is helping me indicate what I'm choosing. I can change the color here by going to the settings, and I can make it blue if I really want. So now my mask is blue. It's entirely your choice. The default color though is red, so I'll just keep it at red for now for today to keep it consistent. And then I can go over here and start adjusting my layer. So I have limited options compared to my normal editing suite within Lightroom because I don't have a tone curve, I don't have my color mixer. However, there's enough here to do some serious damage or change the photo to however you like. I can bring down my exposure all the way to make it a demon kitty or bring it all the way up to make him look rather angelic. But I don't really want to do either of those things. I just want to increase the sharpness and give a little bit more warmth to his eyes. So I'm going to bring the warmth up a bit, and I'm going to bring down the saturation a hair just so that it's a little bit more tempered. And then I'm going to increase the texture a bit and just the clarity a hair. And if I just click on the little eye here, I can preview what it looks like while it's off. And I'm happy with those changes. His eyes are a little bit brighter now. So now that I've made those adjustments to the eyes, I also want to enhance the background a little bit. So I want to make a new layer that's separate from my eyes layer. So I'm going to click on the Create New Mask option here. And it's going to ask me which tool I'd like to use. In this situation, I'm going to want to use the Linear Gradient tool. This is going to allow me to make a gradient across the background, so as a nice soft fall off between where my edit begins and ends. So I'm going to click on this, and to make the mask, all I need to do is simply drag and pull, and I can adjust where it is in the image. If I hold down Shift on my keyboard, it's going to lock it to one of the horizontal or vertical axes on my image. Right now, I don't really care, so I'm just going to kind of freeform it and drag it across here, kind of adjusting the brightest part of my image. If I make adjustments now though, unfortunately, you'll notice that the mask is covering the cat. And if I bring up the warmth in the background, it's also affecting the kitten in the foreground. I don't want that. I want to get rid of the cat from this mask. So I'm going to turn to the brush tool. But rather than adding to this mask, I want to subtract an area from it. So I'm going to hit on Subtract, choose the brush tool, and then I'm just going to paint over the area where Beanie is so that I can kind of get rid of him from this mask. And I can go like this, and you can see already is getting rid of the effects of the gradient tool. If I want to be a little more precise though, I can click on Show Overlay and just get rid of all the red areas on Beanie's face. And there we go. Now, I've gotten rid of all the mask on the cat, and I'm just editing the background. If I want to change where the linear gradient is, I can simply select that layer, and I can move it around, and it won't move the cat's subtraction layer with it. However, I want to move the cat subtraction layer, I can click on it as well, and move it anywhere as well, but obviously I don't want to do that. That defeats the purpose of what I just did. I can move them both together if I wanted to, but again, why would I want to do that? In certain situations it's applicable, but right now it's a bad idea. So let's make some more changes to the background. I can decrease my texture just to make it a little bit hazier. I can add a little bit more brightness just to make it a little bit more dramatic. I can change my highlights levels, bring up my whites a little bit, bring up the shadows. Actually, maybe the whites might have been too much. And there we go. Now, this image is a whole heck of a lot more brighter. Carabiner is just a little bit more emphasized, and as a whole, I'm pretty happy with it. And you can see quickly just before and after how my edits really kind of balanced out the photo a bit more. So I'm very happy with those changes. However, let's move on to some more tools. This next photo I'm going to be editing is one that I've already taken the liberty to adjust the colors on. However, you'll notice that the foreground is very blue, the sky is a little bit muted, and the mountains are maybe just a little bit less contrasty than I would have liked. And through masks, I can fix that. And this is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the automatic selection tools. So I'm going to open up the masks, and I'm going to use the second option here, which is select sky. This tool automatically selects the sky in your image. It works pretty reliably in situations where there's a well-defined horizon. In this one, you can see it's accidentally picking up some of the mountains, snow at the very top, but as a whole, it's doing a pretty good job. So all I'm going to do is bring down the temperature just a hair to make the sky a little bit more blue to match the foreground. And I'll bring down the saturation a little bit and maybe use the dehaze tool to kind of make it pop a little bit more and have a little bit of a gradient there and bring it out. So then I've done that. Looks good. However, still as a whole, the foreground is just a little too cool. And specifically, I think my shadows are way too blue. So I want to make a mask to selectively edit those. I could always do this with split toning. However, you can get a little bit more precise with a mask. So I'm going to create a new layer, and you'll see at the bottom here, we have the option to either choose a color range or a luminance range. And this is going to be super handy for finding my shadows. So I'm going to click on new mask, select that, and then I'm going to click on a dark area like these trees. And you can see it automatically makes a mask covering all my shadows in the dark areas. What I can do here is refine this area of the slider to increase the catchment zone. So like how bright I want this mask to cover. And then this little dot here is going to be my fall off. So how far my gradient goes. I could have it cover almost the whole image if I want. However, I'm going to just tone it back a little bit just to only affect my shadows. And then I'm going to adjust the temperature. So I could bring it all the way down to make it ice blue, or I can bring the warmth up, which is going to really bring out a little bit more kind of red in those mountains. And it actually has a really cool kind of foggy effect in this image you can't see otherwise. And I'm really happy with how that's looking. But through both of these changes, unfortunately, the subject of the image, Devon, has kind of fallen at the wayside, and she's not really visible anymore, and she's become a little bit orange. So let's use the last tool, and that is the subject select tool. So by clicking on this, it's going to automatically select where it thinks either a human or an animal is in the photo. In this case, it did a pretty good job of just selecting Devon. And you can see it's kind of messing up between the legs here, but as a whole, it's a pretty clean edge, and I'm happy to work with that. So all I'm going to do is bring up the exposure maybe a little bit, and she got a little bit too warm with those changes, so I'll bring down the temperature maybe a hair, or maybe just bring down the saturation. And that works. Bring on my highlights, maybe increase the texture a bit to kind of bring out the text in that Canada, and add a little bit of magenta. And there we go. Now she's no longer so faded into the background. And now when I go out, she's much better balanced in this photo. And as a whole, I'm very happy with those colors. They seem a little bit more natural in the photos, pretty much day and night from what the original was, which was very, very blue. So I'm happy with those changes, and it's a good demonstration of how those automatic selection tools can really make selecting areas of the photo very quick. But now let's apply it to a portrait. So I think it's only fair if I'm going to be messing around with someone's face, it's my own face. And this is a photo my friend Ethan took of me a couple years back, and My skin in it is a little blotchy. You can see here I did a terrible job of trimming my non-existent beard, and I kind of want to make my teeth a little whiter and maybe enhance my eyes as well. And through masks, we can achieve all that. The first thing I'm going to want to do is adjust my skin and kind of smooth it out a little bit. So I'm going to get a little bit fancy and show you a handy way to do so. I'm going to use the Subject Select tool, and it's going to automatically make a mask over my body. And then I'm going to choose Subtract, and I'm going to choose a color range and just choose my skin. But there we go. So I have specifically chosen my skin, but this did the opposite of kind of what I wanted, because now I selectively am not editing my skin, choosing everything else on my body but. So to fix this, I'm going to simply invert this layer, and now this mask only is selecting the skin tones on my body. This can be handy when there's other people in the photo perhaps, or you have a different color background or even a peach color background that you don't want to adjust. So this did a pretty good job of finding my skin tones. If I want to make it a little bit less aggressive or more aggressive, I can do so via this slider. So in order to kind of smooth out my skin, I could just bring down the texture and the clarity and make that skin buttery smooth. But all I'm going to do here is use one of the presets that Lightroom actually has and hit Smooth Skin. And it just brings down the clarity a bit and the texture a bit, and I'm always pretty happy with what this mask does. And I'm going to change the name of this to Skin, because there's going to be a lot of layers by the time I'm done with this. And now that I got that done, let's adjust my eyes. And I'm going to go over here, create new mask. I'll use the brush tool and I'll have it set to auto. I'll feather the edges a little less, and I'll just paint over my eyeballs. There you go. And there you go. And again, I'm just going to use the automatic preset from Lightroom here for enhancing eyes. And now my eyes are a little bit brighter. I can increase the texture a bit more if I wanted, and you can make your own presets if you like. However, the ones that Lightroom has in the latest version are pretty darn good. Lastly, let's whiten up my teeth a little bit. So I'll name this one Eyes, and then I'll make a new mask for teeth, and I'll name it Teeth. You don't have to name them, it just helps keeping track. And then all I'm going to simply do again is just paint over my teeth. And you want to be careful not to select your gums, otherwise you'll get rid of those. And then I kind of got my lip a little bit there, so I'm going to hold down Alt, and that's going to automatically create a subtraction brush. And I'm going to just go here and get rid of that little area I got on my lips. And now again, I'm going to use the whitened teeth from Lightroom, which is very white, so maybe I'll just bring down the brightness a little bit and increase the saturation here. And there you go, that's a little bit more realistic. So now I'm already looking a little bit better than I did initially with this photo. My skin's a little bit softer, and I'm happy with kind of how my eyes are the emphasis of the photo. With that said, I could do a little bit more. So one fun way you can kind of make your subject pop in a portrait is by separating them from the background. In this photo, I did have a hair light, so my outline is pretty clean, but the background's very boring and it's just straight gray, and I can change that. So what I'll do is create a new mask, and I'll choose the Radial Gradient tool. This just makes an oval with a gradiated edge, and I'll just make one behind my head, and I can choose the feathering again if I want to do really anything. But if I bring up the temperature here, it's obviously going to affect my face because it's covered by that. So I don't want my face to be affected by this mask. So what I'm going to use is subtract from this mask using the Subject Detect tool. And simply, I'm going to make a cutout from it by using the Subject Detect option. And now we can see my face isn't affected by it. However, the radial gradient behind it acts as kind of a spotlight behind my head. And this can be very handy when you want to kind of change the color. I can make myself have a halo, which is a little bit pretentious, but it does have a cool effect and can really emphasize your subject quite nicely. This has a ton of potential, and there's a whole range of interesting combinations of masks you can do. And really, the possibilities are endless. The big thing to keep in mind is that while these masks are very powerful, they're not going to be as effective as simply taking a photo into Photoshop, because at the end of the day, Lightroom is a bulk photo editor. It's not intended for getting really carried away with masks. With that said, the automatic selection options here and just the versatility of masks can go a long way with helping you improve your editing in selectively enhancing your photos in ways you can't otherwise. And I really recommend playing around with it. With that said, if you have any questions about anything I said in this video, or if you want me to make a video on a topic I didn't touch here, please feel free to let me know in the comments section. I'd be happy to help, and I love ideas for videos. So yeah, please feel free to let me know. And I'll also be making more videos on topics similar to this, so stay tuned to my channel. And if you're interested in seeing them, maybe consider subscribing and liking this video to help me make more like it. Anyways, as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in my next video.